Welcome to White Guys for Kamala. We are tonic masculinity as opposed to toxic masculinity. My name is John Ennis. This is my co-host Morley.
Hello.
Our guest this week is comedian, actor, raconteur Jim Turner. And we look forward to reviewing the campaign highlights from the past week and talking about ways that men can be better men. So to start off, our opening thought this week is going to be empathy. Empathy is something that I think is a really important feature of humankind. I think it's something that when we're in a bad mood, we want to make others feel our bad mood. You know, when we're in a good mood, we want others to feel in a good mood. And so I think that's, you know, when we were talking about anger before, I think that's part of anger is like, I'm angry. I want you to be angry too.
Right.
And I'm going to provoke you and jerk your chain.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think when we're trying to appeal to others in this certainly divided nation right now, ultimately, empathy is going to go a lot further than trying to out-anger someone, which is something else we talked about before.
Yeah, totally. I think that, you know, it's interesting. All three of us are parents. It definitely redefined it for me becoming a parent in terms of truly trying to understand the way somebody else would think, not just for the sake of parroting back what they're saying, but actually understanding how they feel. And I think if you're able to do that, that goes miles for finding common ground, you know? And even just hearing that you understand it helps them find some regulation within themselves, you know?
Yes. And I've had my son say that to me too, because my son has had to deal with me a lifetime of low blood sugar episodes. And there's times that he actually has to, okay, Dad, focus. What do you need? You need some Gatorade? You need something to eat? And there's times he's had to sort of wrangle me in. And I had when we went through the teen years, 16 to, it was like 15 and a half to 17, where it was, whew, man. I mean, my son didn't get into drugs or anything or drink, but he was just tough. And I would get so mad. And I inherited from my dad, door slamming, you know, throwing stuff.
Sure.
And I went to see a therapist, and he went, okay, let's just slow everything down here. At this point, your kid's 16. He will listen to you for a couple more years, and then you kind of lose him. And he's still listening to you. And if you think he's not, you're wrong. He's watching you like a hawk because he doesn't know what to do. He's looking for what do I do to be a man? He's not going to say that. But what you need to do is be the example. That's it. Be the example. He's just watching you. And I know that when you talk to him, I go, yeah, I talked to him, and he just shuts me out. He goes, he's watching you. So when you be the example by slamming doors and throwing stuff, you're showing him when a man gets mad, this is what he does.
Right.
He slams the door and he screams at the top of his lungs. Oh.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Be the example.
Right.
Be the example.
That's good.
Yeah, unlearning anger has been
Right.
a big part of my maturity because, you know, my dad and his dad before him were, you know, nice guys, but they had their own threshold. And so realizing exactly that I'm, you know, do I want my kid doing this? Do I want my kid like fuming and give me the silent treatment and shutting me out? What you put out comes back in.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I wonder then, at the risk of infantilizing the other side and the Trump voters and stuff, but in terms of reaching them and trying to empathize with them and find some kind of common ground there, where it's not necessarily a question of agreeing with their belief systems, but just saying, okay, I understand these are your beliefs. I understand this is how you feel. How can we find some way to keep this country running while we still disagree, you know? And for me, I think that, you know, this convention was especially her speech was just such a wonderful needle to thread of finding that common ground and saying, you know, a lot of the stuff she was saying sounded fairly moderate. You know, so there were some things that, you know, even certain language, certain things, like whether like the word lethal or like, you know, obviously some of her, you know, more patriotic and kind of, you know, but To me, I feel like that if we're going to find any kind of solution, there needs to be some kind of common ground that's reached. And so sometimes I think that means, whether it's modeling and saying, okay, this is sort of how we're going to try and, we want to kind of be treated. So we're going to try and not necessarily bring a lot of smugness or a lot of judgmentalness to our relationships with Trump voters going forward and so forth.
So here's some quotes on empathy from Dr. Brene Brown. She wrote Atlas of the Heart, and she has some really good insight on this, so I'll just defer to her. Empathy is connecting to the emotions that underpin an experience. Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Courage gives us a voice, and compassion gives us an ear. Without both, there is no opportunity for empathy and connection. If we can share our story with someone who responds with empathy and understanding, shame can't survive. Empathy has no script. There's no right way or wrong way to do it. It's simply listening, holding space, withholding judgment, emotionally connecting, and communicating that incredibly healing message of you're not alone. Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because if I were to choose to connect with you through empathy, I would have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. In the face of a difficult conversation, when we see that someone's hurt or in pain, it's our instinct as human beings to try to make things better. We want to fix, we want to give advice, but empathy isn't about fixing. It's the brave choice to be with someone in their darkness, not to race to turn on the lights so we feel better. She speaks a lot about how sympathy is the opposite of empathy, and that sympathy is a way of sort of talking down and trying to impose our own, well, at least, but on the good side, any of these things, when someone's in the middle of something, they want someone else to feel it. They want to feel not alone. And that's what so much of our alienation, if it's anger, if it's depression, if it's sadness, that comes from a feeling of being alone. And so empathy is a powerful antidote to that. But it also, I think, asks a lot from someone to even offer that.
Well, it's also a very male thing to fix it. It's got to be fixed. If something's wrong, of course you fix it.
Yes.
Oh my God, I was driving home, we had a flat, and did you call AAA? No, I had a flat, and it was in the middle of Washington Boulevard, and I had to get the car over. I was very upset. Well, did you call AAA?
Here's what you should have done.
Yeah.
And that's such a strong thing to do. You think you're helping, but it's clearly not. Because you're getting more and more upset as you tell me about this. Yeah. And I'm just trying to figure, well, the smart thing would do, AAA would come out and they'll do that. They'll tow that. Jim.
I would have.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, and that's a hard thing to learn, is just to shut up.
Yeah.
Just listen.
Totally.
Yeah.
Take it in.
Yeah. And I think when you're married, I think that your wife wants you to hear about their bad day. They want you to understand what they're feeling. They don't want you to necessarily rewrite it and say it's not that bad, or you made it alive, or things like that.
At least you didn't. At least this didn't happen.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's so true. I struggle with that in terms of constantly trying to reframe it through a lens of gratitude of but this, like you say, this could have happened. Oh, well, this didn't, And sometimes, obviously, that's not very satisfying for a person. They're like, okay, I'll feel grateful that my life isn't worse later, but right now I just need to feel my feelings.
Yeah, and I'd like you to be there with me.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
rather than just tell me that my feelings are invalid because I'm not suffering more. You know?
Yeah, that's something I certainly had to learn. So, you brought up the how effective Kamala's speech was this week. Let's play a clip of it. I think this was one of the more standout parts that people were taken with.
And as president, I will stand strong with Ukraine and our NATO allies. With respect to the war in Gaza, President Biden and I are working around the clock, because now is the time to get a hostage deal and a ceasefire deal done. And let me be clear, I will always stand up for Israel's right to defend itself, and I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself, because the people of Israel must never again face the horror that a terrorist organization called Hamas caused on October 7. At the same time, what has happened in Gaza over the past 10 months is devastating. So many innocent lives lost. Desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety over and over again. The scale of suffering is heartbreaking. President Biden and I are working to end this war such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination. I will not cozy up to tyrants and dictators like Kim Jong-un who are rooting for Trump. They know Trump won't hold autocrats accountable because he wants to be an autocrat himself.
That was empathy.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot. I read an article on Fox that was talking about how dealing with the specifically with the Israel-Palestine situation, how there was a difference in terms of even just the order of things, that by putting Palestine at the end of that specific comment, she's making it essentially the moral climax of it and basically putting a little bit more weight on it, because before it was a lot more like Palestine, it's terrible what's going on, but let's not forget Hamas and that was sort of the order of things. But by switching it, it actually sort of shows like it's a disproportionate amount of suffering that's going on right now. Not to belittle the Hamas situation and the hostages and all that awfulness, but to recognize that like there's another situation that is clearly even worse.
Because she spoke with so much empathy to what's happening in both regions, it stands out far more than I've heard any politician in discussing this. Usually they're coming from one side and they make it clear. And to hear that for the first time, I was like, well, yeah, I guess you could just say it like that. How about that?
Right.
I guess you could just say, yeah, that's bad and that's also really bad.
Right.
And it's almost a little disproportionate,
Yeah.
but we got to make sure it doesn't happen again. And then you're like, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating, I think, to see politicians have to play that game, and then to see when it's done with bringing some nuance rather than just bringing the quickest way to end the soundbite as possible.
Yes.
With kind of slide out of it as quickly as you can. I mean, when she's talked about abortion, I was like, well, she says she's going to try and make it legal through the Congress. That has lost every single pro-life person. But you know what, though? They were never going to vote for her.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
So just stop trying to court them by being sort of in the middle and wishy-washy.
Right. Yeah,
just
absolutely.
acknowledge it and just say, okay.
At least as far as we've grown up, we've always felt a sense of, candidates for president who are Democrats sort of withholding something or trying a little too hard to be convincing on their three smaller, like less controversial issues, like stem cell research. Okay, that's
Right.
not really, Yeah. So here's some of the reactions to Kamala's speech to give you an idea as to how how certain males reacted.
Survivors of crime.
No
Remind
way.
them, no one
No
should
way.
wish to fight alone.
Kamala Harris will never be my president.
So that's toxic masculinity.
Right.
You think?
I think so.
My God.
I think that's a good example.
I love
of-
the happy dad sign, though, underneath. Like, he seems like a very happy person to me.
I didn't even notice that before. It says
Yeah.
happy dad right there. Yeah, not so much.
Well, okay. I'm sure Kamala really got that message, and you're really sticking it to her by smashing that flat screen TV.
Yeah, and hiring someone else to mount the next one.
Right, exactly.
Other reactions to Kamala's speech. Here's someone who called in and started ranting to Fox News, who happened to have been the previous president.
And we'll be discussing it. He said, look, he was treated very unfairly by the Democrats. He would have beaten Joe Biden in a Democrat primary. I have no doubt about it. And they made it absolutely impossible for him. They made it that you have to get 60, 70% of the vote just to get in. And you know what?
President,
In the end, the Democrats did the same thing to Joe Biden. They threw Joe Biden out of the party.
And that's
they
why
did
we
the
saw a
same
different
thing
night
as they did
tonight.
to RFK.
Mr. President, thank you so
very
much
much, sir.
for the time. We
Okay, thank you
appreciate
very
that
much.
live feedback.
That's how Fox News responds to him
man.
calling up now.
Okay,
He was
okay. Bye.
Yeah, he was he was so triggered. He was like pressing the buttons while he was talking on the phone, and then he called up Newsmax and did the same thing. Just ranted for 10 minutes.
But they let him.
Yeah, and
they
you can
let
tell how upset he is by someone else getting all this attention, but also how stupid he feels, and that's why he can't not and take it out on.
And there's
someone
no
else.
place to put it for him. There's no place to put
He
it.
has no understanding of that.
And again, he can't stand to be laughed at.
Right.
This is going to get very entertaining.
Yeah. And now here was a reaction that I found surprising to Kamala's speech. James Comey, who famously had to put his thumb on the scale at the end of the 2016 campaign and arguably helped push the polls away from Hillary towards Trump by announcing an investigation into her emails that, of course, didn't end up happening, but he still felt like he had to say something and not mention that they were also investigating Russia helping the Trump campaign. This is what James Comey posted in reaction to Kamala's speech. Kamala Harris made me feel like it's finally morning in America. Everyone who cares about the rule of law and America's indispensable role in the world should vote for Harris and Walz. I will. That knocked me over with a feather.
Is there? Do we think there's any kind of reference to Reagan with the Morning in America?
Oh yeah,
thing?
absolutely.
I mean, is that
yeah,
intentional?
That's
it's
the
not,
highest compliment a Republican can come
right,
up with.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah. Morning in America.
It's so funny because it's, again, we've talked about this in previous episodes. They all sort of think they're going to be the Trump whisperer and stuff like that. And then it just all falls apart. And that's why you have so many people in his previous administration that are now like saying like, don't do it. Don't vote for him. He's a danger to democracy. And you wonder, like, I mean, even that the young woman who is the communications person that spoke at the DNC.
Yeah. And
you just think to yourself, like, I don't understand why this wasn't more clear to you before you took that job. Like, it's I think that one of the things, and I remember feeling this really distinctly during the pandemic, of the people that were completely dismissing it, and it was the thing that it always felt like it had in common was they all can't understand or grasp or take something seriously unless it actually affects them. You know what I mean? Like, until their, dad dies of COVID, or until their, whatever, it's like, until that moment, nothing is real to them,
Yeah.
And I feel like so much with Trump, it's the same sort of thing, whether it's the people that work for him or whether it's the people that voted for him. It's like, it's all just this idea. It's all like a game, or it's all like, and I think especially as white men, we so often, it doesn't touch us. None of it touches us. None of the injustice, none of the true challenges affect us as white men, at least as much as it affects all of the other people on this planet, whether it's women or any other, race and things like that. And so, we're talking about empathy today, and just this idea of like, can we, as people who are not necessarily going to be as affected by a Trump presidency or a second one, can we sort of say, okay, but we're doing this again for the people that we don't necessarily experience, but we're going to empathize with them. We're going to, try and do what we can as white men to protect people that are going to be affected by this. And so, it's crazy to me that there's so many people that have worked for him that are like, yeah, man, he was way worse than I thought. And it's like, what were you seeing before that somehow thought he wasn't that bad until you got the inside look? You know what I mean?
Well, that's the lack of empathy.
Right.
That's the whole idea of COVID's not bad until I have it.
Right.
And then I'm on I've got a tube down my throat. Speaking of misinformation about COVID, this week in Men Making Men Look Bad, RFK Jr. Here's a picture from his website where he says, "Left isn't better, right isn't better, better is better. Independent of the broken two-party system and the corporate corruption of our government, RFK Jr. will pursue new policies in the best interest of the American people." And the policies on his page included the humanitarian crisis at our southern border, end the forever wars, the best environmental president in American history, and all those just went away when he suspended his campaign and supported Trump, and making him look even worse, I think, was his the speech he gave on the way out, where he tried to offer rationalizations for what he was accomplishing by doing this and by hooking his wagon up to somebody who is so anti-science and so it doesn't show any compassion for people and only cares about himself and is knee-deep in crimes. And so to watch some of his speech, I think we'll see some telltale signs about his ego.
American voters and those of President Trump. If President Trump is elected and honors his word, the vast burden of chronic disease that now demoralizes and bankrupts the country will disappear. This is a spiritual journey for me. I reached my decision through deep prayer, through hard-nosed logic, and I asked myself, what choices must I make to maximize my chances to save America's children and restore national health? I felt that if I refused this opportunity, I would not be able to look myself in the mirror, knowing that I could have saved lives of countless children and reversed this country's chronic disease epidemic. I'm 70 years old. I may have a decade to be effective. I can't imagine that President Harris would allow me or anyone to solve these dire problems. After 8 years of President Harris, any opportunity for me to fix the problem will be out of my reach forever. President Trump has told me that he wants this to be his legacy. I'm choosing to believe that this time he will follow through.
And he will follow through.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at the beginning, if he honors his word,
Right.
which he's known to do.
Yeah. I mean, come on. How many times does Trump need to show you who he is before you just believe him? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think it was so telling that he says, well, if Trump's elected, chronic disease will end.
Right.
And he also makes it clear, he says elsewhere in his speech, he's like, well, the Kamala Harris campaign wouldn't, they wouldn't return my calls. They wouldn't give me a meeting with Kamala.
Yeah.
And so therefore I'm going with Trump,
Which just shows how craven he is.
Craven.
That he was just like he's like the highest bidder, basically. You know?
Yeah. And he's saying, he's like, well, therefore I will have saved all of these children if Trump is in office. Like the logic is strained even for like someone with a huge ego.
But it's interesting. You sent me an article that was written by a gentleman who we're going to feature on the podcast later on.
Yeah, Greg Palast used to collaborate with RFK Jr.
Right, and watching the sort of decline, cognitive and otherwise, and how just terrible it was for him to see his friend sort of make this steep decline, and he blames, I think, to some degree, the worm,
in his brain,
the brain worm, and also experiencing the terrible trauma of not only the death of his wife and certainly the death of his father, and having to sort of it must be such a strange thing to have the death of your father be something that's part of history that is like replayed. I mean, it's a sad story for sure with him.
So this is a partial list of RFK Jr. controversies that the Trump campaign is now
Did you
taking
read the article about I bought Coke from?
I did read the article about the guy who bought cocaine from RFK Jr. in college, and he sounded like a prick. RFK Jr. Yeah.
And he tried it, and then he bought some, and then he went back to his dorm room, and then RFK Jr. calls him, goes, "You got my straw?" It was a little half straw.
Yeah.
That he just probably put in his pocket.
Yeah.
"You got my straw?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, I guess I do. Do you want that?" He said, "Yeah, bring that back. It's got crystals in it."
Oh, crystals.
Yeah, like there's like special mucus crystals are forming, like a resin in a bowl or something.
That's about as petty as it gets.
Yeah, it's petty, it's privileged, it's dickish behavior. It's also like pseudoscience.
Of course, even back then.
And so
crystals,
that really didn't portend well for RFK Jr.
Yeah.
So these are a list of other RFK Jr. controversies, and again, just a partial list. But he ate a dog. He hit a bear cub with his car and dumped the body in Central Park. He sexually harassed his kid's babysitter. He suggested COVID was designed to spare Jews. He blamed gender dysphoria on chemicals in the environment. He linked school shootings with antidepressants. He promoted anti-vaccine rhetoric, and he invoked Hitler when speaking out against vaccine mandates.
And you don't even have the whale on there.
And now I guess, since I made this list, there's a story that his daughter shared of when they were at the beach and he came across a dead whale, took a chainsaw to it to cut the head off, put it on top of the car and drove for 5 hours with whale juice dripping inside the car.
That's
with a
like
terrible stench. So maybe he does have a thing with like dead animals.
Move to the top of the list, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
The kids
And the kids are getting, oh my God. Yeah. So anyway,
man.
so that's an example of men making men look bad.
Yeah.
So
now, really quickly, I would love to, I want to address some of the work that you do now, because, we talked earlier about, reaching people where they're at, and you do a lot of outreach to try and get, voter registration and stuff like that. Could you talk a little bit about that and what you've done in the last few years since, I feel like it started around 2016 is when you kind of kicked it into high gear, right?
Yeah, well, in 2016, I'd never done anything. I donated and I voted. That's all I did. I never made calls. And I'm bad at calls. I'm bad at registering voters. I'm horrible at registering voters. When we would go to Arizona, to campuses with Field Team 6 and our Swing Left Los Feliz, what I did is I went, I'll drive. I'll do all the driving. And I would drive 8 hours to Phoenix. 8 hours back. Nobody had to drive at all. And that allowed them to be on their laptops, be on their phones, arranging things, arranging that. We get there and we would stay in these Airbnbs, and we went there once with 12 people. And I got up in the morning. I went, okay, we're all going to go to this and this and this. Hey, everybody, what do you need? Coffee? I'm going out for coffee. Let me get your coffees. Let me get anybody food, blah, blah, blah. And drive. And then I would take them to the campus. I would drop them off right where they needed to be. I'm going to go park the car. I'll go park the car. Come back with my clipboard as if I'm going to register voters. Anybody need water? Anything like that?
But you know what, though? That's such practical help.
Yeah, that's
No,
important
and that's
support.
what I figured is that all of this has to be done. Is somebody has to clean up the thing. Somebody has to go get this. That's what I'll do. I'll be the gopher, and I don't mind being the gopher at all. And I would do that. Then we started the Good Deed Corps, and we were having come up with fundraising things. Suddenly, we did an event. And we created an event out of, nothing. And then it was okay. I kind of get what needs to be done, which is everything.
I think you got to find sort of where your skill set is, and you got to find even where your comfort is. Like, if a person is like, I don't want to do phone banking because it seems really uncomfortable to me, it's like there are so many other things that a person can do.
Yes.
So don't feel bad that you don't want to phone bank. There is a lot of stuff that you can do. And even if you've lost, you can at least feel like, well, I did everything I could. I feel like that was the overarching feeling that a lot of people had in 2016. Certainly I did, where it's like, I thought he was going to lose. When he won, there was the feeling of like, I didn't do enough because I assumed.
Yeah.
I didn't do enough because I assumed. And so, and also,
and here we are.
Yeah, and here we are. So there are things that can be done, and I think that we can take and find some hope, even just in the doing of those things.
Right. And so for me, setting an example of the kinds of ways that we can interact and look at this is I think something that I can do, that I can set, because I can control myself and what I do, but I can't control other people, and I can't control what the New York Times is writing, and I can't control what people are putting in my comments section. But
Totally.
I can try to model this behavior like we were talking about before. So when this week in Don't Be That Guy, I think the most viral moment of the DNC was this one, and so we'll talk about it.
It took Gwen and I years, but we had access to fertility treatments. And when our daughter was born, we named her Hope. Hope, Gus, and Gwen, you are my entire world, and I love you. I'm letting you in.
Gus, from many different angles, tearfully saying "That's my dad" with pride, was shared as a tearjerker moment by a lot of people. But then it also attracted a lot of negative reactions. And so we'll look at a couple of those and say, don't be that guy. Here's a guy, Jay Weber, who said, sorry, but this is embarrassing for both father and son. If the Walz represent today's American men, this country is screwed. Meet my son, Gus. He's a blubbering bitch boy. His mother and I are very proud. I think that guy lost.
Who said that?
Jay Weber.
Who's Jay Weber?
He has a radio show, or I should say had a radio show, because he got taken off of it after this came out.
Oh my God.
And this is, now a lot of people, would point out that, Gus is neurodivergent. And so that might be why he seems so emotional and swept up in it. But
which is funny because I didn't get that even. Like,
it really shouldn't matter. If he
it
is.
shouldn't matter. But when I even saw it, it never occurred to me like, oh, he must be neurodivergent because he's being emotional. I was just like, I feel like if I was in that situation, I probably would have been the same way. The only difference is that, I wouldn't have, like, they put a camera right on him. And so, of course, there's the, it's this, but I think it went viral because it was such a true, sincere, emotional response that should be, normal.
Dinesh D'Souza posted, this kid might have mental problems, but he's acting just like Tim Walz. So what's Walz's excuse?
What?
Vince Langman posted a photo of them side by side saying, if this is your dad, this is your son. And it's a picture of Tim Walz mid-stance with his arms out. I think saying that he looks effeminate and equating the emotional breakdown of his son with being overly emotional and not masculine. And so I found it so telling that so many men had issues with a boy being proud of his dad and being so choked up in front of other people. And I think that speaks to how scared men are about showing emotions and that they feel so uncomfortable seeing someone else's. Like, that doesn't affect them. And so I think it's such a tell that they have to run and say, like, no, he's doing it wrong. That's not how you're supposed to behave.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be unhappy like the Trump sons.
Yeah. This is what you get when you're trying to have a sense of humor but have no humanity within it. Because I think to be funny, and I think certainly you're one of the funniest people I know, to be funny, you have to have a level of humanity within yourself to understand, okay, this is funny, this is cruel. You know what I mean? Like, that's the reason why, bullies that push people down into the mud puddle, and go like, ha ha, like, that's not funny. That's just but they think it's funny because they have no humanity. They have no sense of what is appropriate and what is not. So to them, I think a lot of those guys are probably seeing stuff on the Daily Show and stuff. They're seeing people making fun of JD Vance in the donut shop and poking fun and realizing like, well, we want to do that too. So let's attack the kid. And they don't realize like, no, you're not being funny. That doesn't work. That bit you're trying is not going to work because it doesn't have any sense of humanity to it.
Yeah. Well, and talk about empathy. That's a complete lack of empathy to the point where you're shutting yourself down to avoid feeling, what that guy's emotion said to so many other people. Right. So many other people are moved to tears just by watching him.
It's not funny. It's just mean. It's Don, Jr. That's his sense of humor is like just frightening.
Right. They are so used to having the piss taken out of them, so they think like, well, now we'll give it back. If you make fun of Covfefe, we're going to make fun of that kid who loves his dad, and they don't realize that it's not the same thing at all,
Yeah, but it's definitely punching down.
Right.
And this is the area where they're like, well, I control my emotions and I don't let anyone see how I feel. So I have the right to push down on somebody who does show emotion, you know?
Totally.
And I think it's probably one of the more toxic ideas in that men who show emotions are weak, because anger is an emotion. If you are so angry that you smash your TV with a sledgehammer, that's an emotion. That's an emotional bitch boy to me. That's someone who can't control themselves and has to let everybody know they're tantruming.
Yeah. It's true. I think there's certainly emotions that are sort of explosions of emotions that can be positive and it can be negative. But I think that ultimately it's also just interesting the reaction that people can have to that, that they are repulsed by the idea of love
I love that family.
Yeah,
It's so
yeah,
great.
Yeah, the idea of showing love is a great example
Yeah.
for our kids. And so, and speaking of someone who was probably raised well, our white guy of the week is Parker Short. He is the president of the Young Democrats of Georgia. He became viral this summer because he was dancing to Kendrick Lamar at the first Kamala Harris rally, and that introduced him to a lot of other people, and he's since been endorsing candidates and speaking to the media very effectively. And he went viral again with this clip where he spoke to Charlie Kirk, who had just wandered into the convention hoping to make fun of people. So we'll see how he...
Republican governor and Republican Secretary of State in the state of Georgia.
What's your name? He said Parker?
My name's Parker. We have a Republican governor and Republican Secretary of State in Georgia that approved our elections, and Donald Trump said that wasn't constitutional.
All right, relax.
Donald Trump tried to undermine our Constitution.
You're at 10. I just walked in. I'm here to just learn.
Hey, you're an anti-patriotic, anti-constitutional person crashing our party
So let me
because
ask you
you
one
tried
question.
to
I got
stop
one
our
question.
democracy.
I got one question.
Donald Trump called the
Can I ask you
Secretary
one
of State of
question?
Georgia and told him to find him some votes.
What is a woman?
Oh my God. That is so fucking weird, y'all. Maybe you should meet one.
So I thought that was a pretty amazing takedown of a guy who very quickly couldn't deal with both facts and had to fall back on but masculinity. Let's try to define gender real quick, because I got that. I know that much, and I have the right to punch down on people who try to say they're a woman if they're not, and that's all he could really bring it to,
Yeah.
And so, but anyway, so Parker Short is definitely a white guy of the week. And
Well, talk about a person trying to do what he can, you know what I mean? And sort of use whatever he has at his disposal to try and leave some kind of a positive, after effect of his life on this earth, I mean,
and he didn't even waste any time on Charlie Kirk. That clip is 41 seconds, and it was filmed by his crew. That was, and they still post it. That's the thing. It's why do people post things where they're
Kirk's
shooting
crew
themselves?
shot that?
Yeah, that's what's hilarious. So
wow.
We also got to spend time with Shepard Fairey in this past week and ask him about his new Kamala Harris poster, and we were fortunate that he was able to take the time. So we'll show our brief interview with him now. I'm curious if you could tell us how you came about to doing the Kamala print.
Well, when Joe Biden decided to pass the torch and quickly energy started to coalesce around Kamala Harris with Biden's endorsement, I thought it was a really important moment to celebrate a woman who's achieved a lot in politics and is a vastly superior choice for the next president to Donald Trump. There are a lot of important things about Kamala Harris as a candidate. She's got a ton of experience, and she worked her way up through a system that's both biased against a woman and against a person of color. And so her achievement is not because of her being as the Republicans like to call a DEI hire. Her achievement is in spite of the prejudices that exist out there. And I think that's a really powerful statement about her dedication to public service and her drive. Her backstory is very compelling. But what I thought was necessary in that moment is a visual reintroduction to Kamala Harris. My goal was to make sure that her vision, integrity, warmth, leadership were all conveyed.
What kind of thought did you put into the design for the forward poster?
The design of the forward poster was mostly driven by, can I make a portrait that gives the qualities that I want, but also I think it needs to feel patriotic, as almost all political posters do. Trump wants to take us backwards. He wants to take women's rights backward. He wants to take so many things backward. We need to move forward. So after talking to some friends involved in politics, I decided to just use the word forward, keep it positive, and have her looking forward. The initial reference photos that I worked from were both facing the other way. I like looking left when it comes to my politics. The sense of moving into the future, since we all read left to right, I think that her looking in the direction she's looking was important.
Why are you okay with the idea of a woman president?
I'm not bothered at all. I'm actually really happy about that idea. I find that generally speaking, women have a better ability to be collaborative and are a little bit more empathetic to people who are suffering or struggling. I really admire my wife, who is a really great partner, and I've come to appreciate her business savvy, but also her empathy and her kindness. And a ton of my coworkers are women. I just think it's time to have more women in politics, and a woman at the top shouldn't threaten anyone. If we claim to believe in equality, then let's prove it.
There's a lot of toxic masculinity out there right now, especially online. What is it that you think a lot of guys who are growing up could learn to not necessarily be so easily swayed by some of those more toxic influences?
You know, for all these guys who have joined the online toxic masculinity mob, and think about how they would treat their mother, think about how they feel about their mothers, how they feel about other women in their lives. And we need both sexes having ideas, having power, having collaborative relationships. These are all very important things. Acknowledging loneliness rather than attacking someone that you, whether it's a woman or a person of color or anyone that you think might be a competitor. That's how we look at how the nature of power really works and how we improve things to give opportunities to everyone, including white males. If you're a working class or middle class white male, it's very easy to feel like the American dream is hard to attain. It's even harder for women and people of color. So there should be solidarity with everyone that's in that bracket, working class, middle class, because the system is rigged for all the power to go to the top. If you are willing to admit that and then try to fix it, you get a lot more done than just scapegoating people.
Those words.
And great poster too.
Oh my gosh.
Really great.
Yeah, well done putting it up, by the way.
You as well, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, it was strange. I put a lot of my own stuff up over the years, and it's interesting it was a weird experience putting up Shepard Fairey, but I'm such a fan, and he's meant so much to me and so much to all street artists that being able to put up a poster of his was strangely emotional for me. I mean, obviously I believed in what I was putting up, but even in terms of just being like feeling that connection to him was really cool too. So it was great to talk to him.
Did he know you before?
We'd been in a few different solo group shows together, and obviously knew a lot of similar people, but had just never actually like met. And it was always sort of one of those things where I was like kind of nervous. It was one of those things like, I don't want to like make myself look stupid. I don't want to be bummed out if he's,
right.
if he thinks I'm an idiot or whatever.
So you're Morley.
Yeah. There's always those experiences that are, you can run into in life. But it was nothing but great. It was awesome meeting him, and it was really cool to, talk to the guy who's meant so much to me over the years.
Yeah, he said he was a fan of your work.
That was like, one of those moments where you're just like, but inside your head you're just like, what? This can't be real.
Yeah, he was psyched to get your book.
Yeah,
and he was genuinely like, wow, I wanted to buy this once, but I didn't want to have. I was walking somewhere, and I didn't want to have to carry it.
Yeah,
and so and then he ran and got one of his. He said, can I reciprocate?
Yeah,
and you're like, can you please?
Yeah,
of course.
Cool. This is one of those moments though where you're just like, you have to make sure that you're not gonna like let it slip out and be like, so can we be friends? Can we be best friends? I just want to know if we can be best friends.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. So, and you'd worked with him in the past with the poster that he made for your documentary, Pay to Play. And it was just so cool of him, obviously, to talk to us, because it's not like we're NBC News. But
no, but I could tell, and I think anyone who watches this could tell that this is exactly what he wants to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about when I approached him for my documentary, I was pitching him something that was about campaign finance reform and street artists, and those are like two of his biggest issues.
Right.
So that for someone to know who Lawrence Lessig is and Lydia Emily, and then to both know them personally, it was like, of course, this is all, I'm all over this. So I gotta say, he's been as supportive as anyone, and And I've gone back to him many times to ask for help on other projects, and usually all social issues, and he's always jumped at the opportunity. So
honestly, I'm every single time I go to anything that's even the slightest bit humanitarian or funding arts programs in schools, every single time, oh, there's a Shepard Fairey piece that's being donated, and it's like without fail. I mean, to the degree where you're just like, I mean, I would worry that he's worried about, like, I'm just putting so much stuff onto donation that is it devaluing the rest of it? He's got such a big heart, and I feel like talk about an example of a white male that's doing what he can. Obviously, his whole experience with the Obama poster has elevated his status and did this rocketed him to a new stratosphere of as an artist, but seeing what he's done with his art and with the influence that has had over the years, I think has been so encouraging to people like us that are, again, wondering, what can we do? What can we do? He's like, this is what I'm good at. This is what I can do. This is the influence I have. I'm going to utilize it and try to, make a difference. And to me, that's a great example to follow.
Yeah, because I see that. I'm like, I'm not going to be that, but I can do what I can do.
Yeah.
I can put up posters. I can make up something that encourages, social action, other people to care.
Yeah. I can hand out donuts. I can, do all the driving to Arizona, or I can, run a movie in my backyard.
And if people are wondering what they can do, we ask people, instead of doing a Patreon for the show, that they donate to the White Dudes for Harris, through the White Dudes for Harris to the Harris Walz 2024 campaign. The donation link is secure.actblue.com/donate/white dudes. So thank you very much, Jim, for joining us. And thank you for joining us. We are White Guys for Kamala. Getting it straight. Yeah. White Guys for Kamala. And we'll be back next week with some more, with another guest and some more outrageous videos. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This episode was recorded at Green Lab Studios in Los Angeles, California. Our engineers were Paul Roman, Daniel Amato, and Owen Stinsmullen.